Did you know that most of the artistic giants of the Renaissance weren't exactly living like royalty?
Yeah, it's funny. We tend to picture them, right alongside their wealthy patrons, maybe swimming in gold coins.
Right. But the reality was often pretty different. So today we're plunging into a set of sources that really challenge our assumptions about artists.
Both historical artists and contemporary ones, too.
Exactly. From those who crafted masterpieces for the powerful families back then, all the way to modern creators grappling with, well, artificial intelligence. We'll be looking at how artists historically relied on patronage. And then we're going to tackle this genuinely thought-provoking, maybe even a bit spicy satirical piece.
Oh, yeah, that one. It argues modern artists are actually a privileged class, and they're pushing back against AI out of, entitlement. It's quite the take.
It really is. So our goal here for you listening is to explore these kind of contrasting landscapes.
Right. We want to get a clearer picture of the financial, the social conditions that shaped artists through history.
And then really dissect this modern argument, figure out what it tells us about the current art world and, the impact of new tech.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's dive into this history first. Patronage. It sounds like for a huge chunk of history, artists weren't exactly free agents. Not like we might think today.
Absolutely not. Our sources make it super clear. For centuries, artistic creation was largely driven by commission, not so much independent expression.
So the patron was key.
Totally central. Think about the Renaissance. You've got your Michelangelos, your Leonardos, your Raphaels.
Icons, right.
The big names. Yeah, but they were primarily funded by powerful patrons like the Medici family, the church, various royal courts.
And their work reflected that.
Often, yes. Their incredible works often served the interests, the prestige of those patrons. It wasn't always just about the artist's vision. It was often, fulfilling a specific request.
So less, here's my artistic soul laid bare on canvas, and more.
More like, right, the Duke needs a portrait that screams power for the new hall.
Yeah.
Precisely. And this wasn't just the Renaissance. Move into the Baroque era, composers like Bach, Handel, they often held positions in noble courts, royal courts.
Their music was tied to their employers.
Yeah, to the needs and tastes of their employers. Mozart's story is interesting, too, because he was navigating this sort of shifting landscape, trying for more independence, but still, relying on aristocratic support.
And even earlier, medieval times.
Well, back then, the church was really the dominant commissioner, mostly religious art, obviously. Artists then were seen more like skilled craftspeople, part of guilds.
Not necessarily high-status individual geniuses.
Not in the way we think of it now. Their social standing wasn't automatic.
It's a really different picture, almost like a specialized trade, as you said.
Exactly.
Were there any exceptions, though? Any artists who managed to break that mold, find a different path?
Oh, sure. There were definitely exceptions, and things varied by region. Our sources mention Albrecht Dürer.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, through his printmaking, his business sense, he actually achieved considerable wealth and recognition, kind of blurred those traditional class lines a bit.
Interesting.
And then you have someone like Artemisia Gentileschi. Came from an artistic family, but she still mostly navigated the world through patronage.
Still needed those connections.
Right. And we also see fascinating examples outside Europe. Think about China.
Right.
The scholar officials there practiced calligraphy, painting, but it was part of their elite education, their social role. So art wasn't always this separate profession. It was integrated.
Wow, that's a really interesting perspective. Art as part of a broader identity, not just a job.
Exactly. And what about other places?
Yeah, good question.
Well, across the Islamic world, you had caliphs, sultans, huge patrons of arts and architecture. Just think of the Taj Mahal.
Breathtaking. And a direct result of royal patronage.
Absolutely. Or in Japan, the powerful feudal lords, the daimyo, they provided significant support to artists, craftspeople.
So this basic model artist needs financial backing from a patron. It was really widespread. Different cultures, different times.
Seems to be a very common thread throughout history.
Okay. So that romantic image we might have. The solitary, maybe independently wealthy artist from centuries past. Mostly not accurate.
For the most part, yeah, it seems inaccurate. They needed support.
So how did we get from that to a world where artists can, at least sometimes, achieve financial success on their own?
Well, the big shift really starts happening in the 19th century. That's when we see the rise of what historians call the bourgeois art market.
Bourgeois art market.
Yeah, it's a shift away from direct commissions from, dukes and pokes towards artists creating work first and then selling it, often to a growing middle class through things like galleries and exhibitions.
Oh, the gallery system.
Right, and you see this stark contrast. Someone like Van Gogh, who, well, famously struggled, sold almost nothing in his lifetime.
Tragic, yeah.
Compared to someone like Monet, who was, relatively speaking, much more successful navigating this new system. Galleries, private buyers.
So that opened up possibilities.
It did. I mean, grants and commissions still exist today, of course. But modern artists have more potential paths to independent financial success. Sales, licensing, lots of different avenues.
Okay. So the big takeaway from the history part. For most of history, artists weren't rolling in dough independently. They relied heavily on patrons.
That seems to be the main story, yeah.
Right. Now, let's switch gears, because this next part, this hot take on modern artists, it sounds like it flips that whole idea on its head.
It absolutely does. This piece we looked at, it offers a deliberately provocative and, let's stress, satirical argument.
Satirical is the key word here, maybe.
Definitely. It basically says, no, it's modern artists who are the privileged ones, benefiting from a system that this piece argues is kind of skewed in their favor.
Okay, strap in. The first grenade this hot take throws is about copyright law. It calls copyright, get this, the ultimate welfare program for artists. Wow. That's inflammatory.
It is. Very strong wording. The core of the argument in this satirical piece is that copyright gives artists this government-backed monopoly over their creations.
A monopoly?
Yeah, allowing them to profit from one piece of work for a really long time, often, decades after the creator is gone, which the piece argues is unlike many other jobs.
And it mentions the length of copyright.
It does. It specifically points to how copyright terms have been extended, calling it sarcastically, of course, hoarding cultural capital, their phrase.
Okay. And then it gets into this comparison, right? Artists criticizing AI for learning from data, while artists themselves build on past work.
Exactly. The satirical edge is definitely sharp there.
Right.
The hot take suggests there's this perceived hypocrisy.
Like artists benefit from the collective human canon, as the piece puts it.
But object when AI does something kind of similar with public data. That's the accusation in the piece.
Wow, okay. Then the argument shifts to the modern art market itself.
Right. Which it describes as, another loaded phrase, a tax haven for elitism.
Ah, okay. I think I know where this is going. The infamous duct-taped banana makes an appearance.
It certainly gets a mention. Yeah, it's become this sort of symbol for art where the value seems disconnected from maybe traditional skill or wide appeal.
Right, more about hype or connections.
That's the argument here, that the contemporary market often values exclusivity, maybe as much as the art itself.
And the piece also brings up platforms like Patreon, Spotify, Etsy.
Yeah, suggesting that these platforms let even, let's say, less accomplished people monetize their passion.
And contrast that with people in other fields.
Exactly. Drawing a stark contrast with the struggles maybe faced by people in more traditional jobs who don't necessarily get paid for their passions.
So the implication is, modern artists have all these ways to make money doing what they love, unlike lots of other folks.
That's the angle, yeah.
Which leads directly into the AI debate. The hot take argues artists' opposition isn't really about artistic integrity,
but about protecting their cartel. That's the provocative term used.
Wow, cartel.
The argument is that AI, because it makes creating images or music potentially easier, it kinda democratizes creativity.
And that's a threat.
According to this piece, yes. A threat because it might diminish the perceived value of traditional artistic skills, the established pathways, galleries, commissions, etc.
So it reinterprets artists' concerns.
Yeah, it characterizes worries about AI, the AI's theft arguments as basically fear. Fear of losing their special status, their expertise, and the money that comes with it. Fear of their divine creative realm, as the piece puts it, being invaded by tech anyone can use.
That is a pretty brutal framing of the anti-AI sentiment from some artists.
It's definitely pulling no punches.
And then it goes after the whole passion idea, right? Saying passion doesn't automatically mean you get paid for it.
Right. This part feels particularly pointed. The argument is, look, most people don't get paid just to do what they love. Why should artists be the exception?
So they truly love art.
Yeah. They do it in their spare time, like a hobby, just like other people knit or play guitar or whatever, without expecting a full salary for it. That's the argument presented.
And it even brings up Shakespeare.
Yeah, mentioning he had a day job, essentially, as a counterpoint to the idea that we must fully support artists financially or culture itself will just, wither and die.
Okay. And the final nail in this satirical coffin seems to be the idea that art wasn't really meant to be a primary career anyway.
That's the concluding argument. It claims that historically, even for privileged folks, art was often a secondary thing, a side hustle almost.
Even for Da Vinci or Van Gogh, it argues. Though Van Gogh didn't exactly have privilege.
Well, the piece uses them as examples, maybe loosely, to contrast with what it sees as a modern expectation.
Which is?
The expectation that artists should earn a comfortable living just from their art, maybe based on having a degree, even if there isn't much market demand for their specific work.
So the piece concludes AI isn't killing art.
But it's killing the entitlement, again, their word, the entitlement, that says creating art should automatically fund a comfortable lifestyle.
So putting it all together, the core argument of this satirical hot take is modern artists are gatekeepers. They use copyright, elitist markets, anti-AI feelings
to protect a system that unfairly benefits them. That's the gist of this provocative satirical viewpoint.
And we really need to stress again for everyone listening, this is presented as a satirical piece.
Absolutely vital. It's using exaggeration, irony. It's not necessarily a balanced analysis, but a critique aimed at certain aspects of the art world and the AI debates. We're reporting on its perspective, not endorsing it.
Okay. So, wow. We've taken quite the journey there.
Yeah.
From the historical reality where artists mostly relied on patrons
to this very, very different modern critique that paints them as, well, privileged and maybe fighting tech out of self-interest.
It certainly gives you, the listener, a lot to think about. Two very different lenses.
Indeed. When you put these perspectives side by side, it really forces you to consider how our understanding of artists, the value we give creative work, how it's all evolved.
Or maybe hasn't changed as much as we think in some ways.
Could be. And of course, new tech like AI just throws another huge complex variable into the mix.
Absolutely. So for you listening, we kind of leave you with this. How do these historical facts and this, let's call it challenging contemporary take, shape your understanding?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on these arguments about privilege? About AI's impact? Does the historical context change how you see the current debates?
And maybe looking forward, as technology keeps reshaping everything, including creative fields, what does it really mean to be an artist today? And who gets to decide the value of their work?
Or here's another angle. If that old patronage model is mostly gone, is the anxiety around AI maybe a sign that we need a perhaps uncomfortable but necessary reevaluation of how artists fit into society and how creative work gets sustained?
Lots to mull over.